Good morning, everyone. My name is Thùy. I'm a full-time teacher at Ho Chi Minh City Industry and Trade College. My co-author in this article is Dr. Trần, who is currently working at Thu University. Today, I'm very happy to be one of the presenter of the AET Zone Conference 2020. My article is about English speaking difficulties that non-English major students at my college are dealing with. I suppose that we start now. Firstly, I would like to introduce you about my abstract. Yeah. Um, speaking speaking English well is one of the final goals for EFL learners. However, many EFL learners in Vietnamese context still face a number of difficulties when speaking English, and therefore this study aims at exploring English-speaking difficulties in terms of linguistic, psychology, and learning environment-related difficulties encountered by non-English majors, and is involved 110 non-English majors at Ho Chi Minh City Industry and Trade College in answering a questionnaire and participating in semi-structured interview. The results reveal that the most serious groups of English-speaking difficulties from which researcher participants suffer with linguistic-related difficulties, followed by psychology-related difficulties, but they did not encounter any learning environment-related difficulties when speaking English. The results further indicate that female students suffers from the linguistic-related difficulties and psychology-related difficulties more than male counterparts, but both females and male students did not face learning environment-related difficulties in similar extent. Such findings are hoped to contribute to a better understanding of non-English major speaking difficulties in EFL context and other similar ones. So now we're going to talk about the first part of my article is the introduction. Speaking is one of the main factors in language, which is considered as the most demanding skill for EFL. Language has to be spoken, and thus learners master speaking skills to master language. However, many researchers have found that EFL learners still face a number of difficulties in learning speaking skill. Learners have learned have difficulties in speaking because of new vocabulary and new parts of speech they do not know, or strange spelling that they do not know how to pronounce. Most learners' speaking skills are still limited because they spend their time studying grammar and vocabulary instead of putting what they have learned into practice through speaking. And furthermore, it is observed that many EFL contexts that learners still cannot speak English properly, although they have been learning English for many years or more. Learners are scared and afraid of speaking English, and as a consequence, learners do not have ability to put words together in a meaningful way to reflect their thoughts, and they are not confident enough to communicate in English in Vietnamese context, especially in case of Ho Chi Minh City Industry and Trade College, where students in all majors are required to learn basic English, students seem to have big gaps in learning speaking skill. It has been observed that a great number of students had difficulties in speaking, such as lack of ideas and confidence about the knowledge of grammar, structures, pronunciation, vocabulary, or they encounter with psychological matters which prevent them from speaking English well, and therefore in this study focus on speaking skills in terms of investigating the difficulties that sophomore non-English major students at business faculty were facing when learning speaking. The research question of the article as follows. Firstly, what English speaking difficulties do non-English major students at HITC encounter? Secondly, do non-English majors English speaking difficulties differ in terms of gender, and if yes, is how? Yeah. So secondly, I would like to introduce you the next part, namely literature review. And there are many researchers, both around the world and in Vietnam context, have mentioned about English speaking difficulties in their studies. And to save time, I just mentioned shortly some researchers, as you can see in the screen. If you are interested in this part, you can have a look at my article in order to get more information. Yeah, and previous study is as yeah, you can see in the screen. Okay, so um, now thirdly, I would like to introduce you the third part regarding methodology. 3.1 Research setting and sample. According to the official curriculum of HRTC for the diploma training for non-English major, all non-English majors are required to finish the English skill program before learning English for their specific purposes. The program designed for non-English major has 5 levels. At the beginning of the academic year, the freshmen have to take placement tests. If they can pass the test, they will start learning English 1, and otherwise, they have to study basic English classes, which may mainly focus on grammar, without studying speaking English. And when they study English 1, English 2, and English 3, they study all 4 skills, such as listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Each English uh, in each English level is studied in 45 periods. Student learns 3 periods of English per week in 15 weeks. The materials for the English skill programs are for corners from 2A2 to 3A. Speaking skills are taught along with grammars and other skills by Vietnamese teachers. In class, students practice speaking English with their partners, who they can choose themselves. After each lesson, the students are given a model conversation and a list of questionnaires which can be learned by heart. And after a peer of students presents their conversation, they will be asked some information related to their topic. As you can see on the screen, the table 1 illustrates the participant information. Yeah. So I will move to this part. Yeah. Because all the information I illustrate very clearly in the screen by the table. Okay. 3.2 Research instrument. The qualitative and quantitative data were collected by using a closed-ended questionnaire and semi-structured interview. The former was adapted from two studies of Yacine and Cabret. The questionnaire has 17 items divided into 3 groups: linguistic-related difficulties with 6 items, psychological-related difficulties with 3 items, learning environment-related difficulties with 8 items. The 5-point Likert scales from strongly agree to strongly disagree to strongly agree was used to this item. And the Gronsbat and Fat of linguistics, psychology, and learning environment related difficulties is 0.7, 0.79, and 0.72. So this means that the reliability of the questionnaire is acceptable. With respect to semi-structured interview, it aims at gaining important information of students' speaking difficulties. It has 4 main questions, and the questionnaire and interview were in the students' mother tongue, so that they did not have any have any language difficulties in responding to the questionnaire and the interview. Okay, 3.3 Procedures for data collection and analysis. Regarding to data collection, the questionnaire was delivered to 110 students in person after the questionnaire has been piloted. It took them 20 minutes to finish the questionnaire. After 1 week, each of 20 students was invited to a informal, semi-structured interview. Each interview took place around 30 or 35 minutes. All interviews were recorded for later transcription. And so, when it comes to data analysis, the quantitative data were analyzed by SPSS in terms of descriptive statistics. The interval mean scores were interpreted as strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree. And meanwhile, the qualitative data was analyzed by content analysis within the following step. First, the transcripts were read many times and divided into different groups. After that, the data was coded, and next, the data having similar ideas were put into larger groups. And finally, the groups and the teams were analyzed to discover the links among them. And all interviewees were called as student 1, student 2, student 20, in order to assure the validity of data analysis. Interpreting was employed. And two researchers in the same field were invited for analysis of three random chosen pieces of data, and the consistencies of the data analysis should be reached at least 90-95% among interpreters. And so let's bring me to the end of this part. Let's have a look at the next part, results and discussion. Okay. The table 2 shows the data about the speaking difficulties that non-English major students encounter. This can be seen that the mean is 3.12 and the SD is 0.45, which means the student was not sure whether they faced difficulties in learning English or not. Nevertheless, a closer look at groups of speaking difficulties, it is seen that linguistic-related difficulties has the highest mean score, followed by psychological-related difficulties and learning environment-related difficulties. This can be interpreted that the participants only encounter linguistic difficulties, but they were uncertain about psychological-related difficulties. In addition, they did not face learning environment-related difficulties. Okay, now table 3. It illustrates the number of linguistic-related difficulties that students had when they spoke English. And it can be seen that students often encounter difficulties in speaking English because they did not have enough vocabulary to express their idea. In addition, the students often experience speaking difficulties and they were unable to form correct sentences or select suitable words or vocabulary to express their ideas. Pronunciations of the words seem to be the least popular issues among the students. The other elements regarding linguistic problems that the students often face when speaking English include using correct intonation and stress, as well as lacking knowledge of many grammatical structures. The result from the interview also showed the similarity with the data from the questionnaire. So for example, the student 2, student 6, student 9, and students 12 reported that they had many difficulties in speaking because they did not know many English words and it was difficult for them to remember vocabulary. Yeah. So how about psychological related issues? The table 4 demonstrates the data about psychological problems that the non-English majors face when they spoke English. An inspection of the data in the table clearly shows that the students sometimes experience difficulties in speaking English because of their feelings of shyness and when they were asked to speak English in class, which is the highest number in the table. The least popular problems that the students have when communicating in English seem to be the feelings of being laughed at by their classmates when they spoke English in class. The other problems that prevent the student from speaking English in class was likely to be the fear that they may have been criticized by the friends when they make the conversation in English, in class. And the data from the interview was also support the information from the questionnaire. Some of the students 1, 6, 14, and 17 say that they feel afraid when they had to speak English in class and they were not used to standing in front of the class to speak English. Yeah. Table 5 gives the data on the speaking difficulties regarding learning environment that the student encountered when doing speaking activities in class. What stands out in the table is the fact that the student has problems with speaking English in class because their speaking mistakes were sometimes corrected immediately in class, which is the highest number in the table. Another significant element that causes students problems with speaking English in class tend to be the fact that the student finds it difficult to concentrate in class, which may have been caused by the noise in the class. However, being confused about the ideas of the speaking activities and the comparisons of speaking ability in class appears to have the least impact when the student communicated in English in class. Yeah, the difference in major speaking difficulties in terms of gender. The table 6 show that there was a significant difference in non-English majors' overall English-speaking difficulties in terms of gender. This can refer that a female has more speaking difficulties rather than fellow males. Regarding three groups of the English-speaking difficulties, significant difference in linguistics related difficulties and psychology related difficulties were found. But students encounter many learning environment difficulties in a similar extent regardless of the gender, such as the results can be understood that female students struggle with linguistic related difficulties and psychology difficulties are less serious than their male counterparts, and meanwhile, both male and female students did not suffer from learning environment related difficulties in a similar ways in terms of statistics. Okay, now this is about the discussion, and the study has found out the participations has some speaking difficulties which were resulted from the linguistic issues. First of all, the student did not have enough vocabulary to express their ideas, and they also could not choose appropriate words to illustrate their opinions, and this can make students incapable of delivering the thoughts through speaking naturally. And the results can be explained by the fact that most of the students in research come from other provinces where speaking skills are not emphasized in the teaching curriculum at high school. And all the students learned at high school is just grammatical features which are focused in a lesson to help them to pass the exam. And the findings of the study are similar to the ideas of some researchers you can see on the screen. Yeah, it is also concluded that learners seem to get confused when choosing appropriate vocabulary to express their thoughts by the target language. Yeah, grammatical features seem to be next difficulties. For example, students did not know grammatical points and they did not know how to put words into correct orders in order to form complete sentences. The finding in the questionnaire was to respond to the data collected from the interview. When the students were asked about the difficulties they encounter when they speak English, most of the students said that they did not know which grammar structure they needed to apply to put words in correct order to form meaningful sentences. And this can be explained that most of the students were at low level of English when they were admitted to the college, and therefore their knowledge of English grammar was limited. Yeah. And thirdly, the pronunciation caused the student many difficulties. Most of the students had trouble because they did not know how to pronounce words, as well as how to use correct stress and intonation in particular situations. In the interview, the student also reviews that one of the reasons for the speaking difficulties was the lack of knowledge of pronunciation. They admitted that they did not want to speak English because they did not know how to pronounce words correctly, which with regard to the fact that they were not taught speaking skills properly at high school, and they obviously encountered many difficulties in pronouncing words correctly. And in addition, the findings of the study are compared to those of the river study. Yeah. Now, fourthly, the findings of the research show that the student difficulties in speaking English were sometimes caused by the following psychological factors, including the anxieties of receiving criticism or negative feedback from others while speaking, and the feelings of being laughed at when making mistakes or the shyness to speak in class. The result can be explained by the fact that most of the students in the study was not competitive in English and were usually passive in class, and as a result, they were afraid that they may not be able to speak English correctly, which may make their classmates laugh at them and make them lose faith in class. And in the interview, some of the students also said that they did not dare to speak English in class and they were not used to standing in front of the crowd to speak English. And it seemed that psychological factors are also the main matters which prevent students from speaking performance. Yeah, and you can see there's the result of this article is similar with some previous study of other researchers you can see on the screen. And therefore, there is no differences between the findings of the current study to other study with similar topic. And fifthly, many students admitted that the learning environment was not the main obstacle, which prevent them from joining and improving their speaking activities. And nearly most of the participants agreed that learning environment was not created in good condition for them to study. They opposed to the opinion that they were confused about the ideas of the speaking activities, and also admitted that they were both under pressure when speaking. The participants had neutral attitudes about the idea that mistakes were not corrected immediately very often, and they found it hard to concentrate. In addition, their speaking abilities was not always compared among students. A student has no comments about the teaching mentors from the teachers who has motivated them or encouraged them a lot. Okay. However, and the finding reveals that the student disagree with the idea that there was not given enough time to prepare as well as they were not encouraged to think of the idea in English. So, last but not least, participation was found to face English-speaking difficulties in significantly different ways in terms of gender. But in details, only two groups of linguistic-related difficulties and psychology-related ones showed significant differences between male and female. And one of the possible explanations for this may be that both male and female students had low level of English language proficiency, and most participants came from other province other than Ho Chi Minh City. And this story is aligned with the Trần and Đảng 2018, which confirmed that students could face linguistic-related difficulties in their speaking significantly in terms of length of learning English. So that's bring me to the end of the discussion part. Now let's move to the last part, namely conclusion. So this study has revealed that non-English major students face significant English speaking difficulties when studying at college. And regarding the main difficulties, the linguistic difficulties were the most common difficulties that the students were afraid of. And the second one, psychology difficulties, seem to be the reluctant factors which may or may not affect student ability. However, learning environment had did not prevent students from speaking. So what is more, male students suffer from linguistic-related difficulties and psychology-related difficulties less than the fellow females, but mm, they both did not encounter learning environment-related difficulties in similar contexts. Yeah. Some implications for the study roles regarding the teacher in charge of teaching speaking skills. It is advisable that teachers make use of different kinds of teaching materials to help students broaden their knowledge about linguistics. In addition, they can explain and verify the difficult linguistic points in a simple way to assist students in gaining fundamental background of English. Furthermore, it is a sense of teachers to investigate the learning styles of the students as well as their interests in order to select appropriate speaking topics for the speaking activities in class. Additionally, after each lesson, students should provide students with constructive feedback on the speaking performance to help students recognize their speaking mistakes and improve their speaking performance in the future. It is crucial for teachers to introduce some useful learning strategy, yeah, to enhance their learning. Teachers should motivate students to speak not only inside but also outside classroom because the limitation speaking periods at school are not enough for students to develop. Yeah. So we have also have some indication for the student. Okay, as a student, and they should be encouraged to enlarge enlarge for the old vocabulary in various fields. Students should self-study at home to equip input of the speaking process. Besides knowing a wide range of vocabulary, students should learn how to pronounce those new words correctly as well. Additionally, students should learn from metaphor structures, which are used frequently in speaking as preparation for other inputs. But exactly knowing essential vocabulary, their pronunciation, as well as the way to put words into correct grammar rules will help students overcome their difficulties in linguistics and also assist students to develop their speaking skill. And besides, they should create plans for practicing speaking skill on what and how to speak, how much time they should spend on speaking lesson, and they should come up with a plan a plan to evaluate the improvement at the speaking. Besides, students should stimulate to involve in a lesson without worrying about a mistake and should actively to cooperate with their friends when studying English, yeah, as well as to ask the teachers for valuable advice. They can practice speaking with their friends at home and share the experience in learning English with each other and do some fun activities to learn English together. Yeah. So, however, in this study still bears some limitations. The small sample size is likely to be one of the limitations of the research because it may be an impact on the validity of the findings of the research. And for example, there may be more speaking learning strategy and more difficulties in learning speaking that have not been mentioned in this research. In addition, there are many other correlations between learning strategies and speaking difficulties that have not been discovered and due to the limited scope of the study. Furthermore, the limited time of the study may have prevented researchers from gaining deep insights into the field of studies. Finally, and only two research instruments were applied to collect data in this research, and which limits the numbers of collect data as well as the quality of the data. So that's bring me to the end of my presentation. If you, yeah, if you have any question, please leave the comments below. Yes. Okay, this is preferences. Yeah, thanks for listening.